In the frozen heart of Petrograd, as the year 1917 dawned under a leaden sky, a single man stood at the precipice of history, his trembling hands clutching the reins of an empire that stretched across 1/6 of the Earth's landmass. Tsar Nicholas II, the last absolute monarch of Russia, faced pressures that would shatter lesser souls. A world war devouring millions, a restless populace starving in the streets, and whispers of revolution echoing through the corridors of power. The air was thick with the scent of impending doom, snow muffling the distant cries of factory workers and the sharp crack of Cossack whips. No one yet fully grasped that this gentle family man, devoted to his hemophiliac son and German-born wife, would become the architect of his own dynasty's annihilation. The collapse did not announce itself with fanfare or fire. It crept in through the cracks of indecision, where leadership under extreme pressure revealed the fragility of even the mightiest thrones. As soldiers froze in trenches and breadlines stretched for miles, the stage was set for a rupture that would echo across the 20th century, reshaping the fate of nations and the very soul of humanity. The Russian Empire at the turn of the century gleamed with the illusion of permanence, its vast territories a tapestry of snow-covered steppes, golden-domed cathedrals, and opulent palaces where nobility danced under chandeliers that sparkled like captured starlight. Nicholas inherited a realm forged by centuries of Romanov rule, where the Tsar was not merely ruler but father to his people, anointed by divine right. Yet beneath the surface of this grandeur lay deep fissures. The emancipation of the serfs decades earlier had unleashed forces of modernization that the autocracy struggled to contain. Railways snaked across Siberia, factories belched smoke into the skies of Moscow and St. Petersburg, and a burgeoning middle class began to question the old order. Daily life for the aristocracy revolved around balls and hunts, their laughter drowning out the distant rumble of discontent. In the countryside, peasants toiled in mud-choked fields, their wooden izbas filled with the smell of black bread and icon candles, clinging to ancient traditions while yearning for land of their own. The empire's heart beat to the rhythm of orthodox hymns and military parades. But few sensed the gathering storm that would test the limits of imperial leadership in ways no previous czar had endured. Before the deluge, Russian society pulsed with a deceptive rhythm of routine and resilience. In the grand salons of high society, women in silk gowns whispered gossip over samovars steaming with fragrant tea, while men debated politics in smoke-filled clubs. Workers in the Pudilov factories hammered steel from dawn until exhaustion claimed them, their bodies aching from 12-hour shifts amid the clang of machinery and the sting of industrial soot. Peasants rose with the sun to plow frozen earth, their breath visible in the biting cold, sustained by thin soups and the faint hope of a better harvest. Children played in snowy courtyards, unaware of the political tremors shaking the foundations of their world. The Tsar's family embodied this fragile idyll at Tsarskoye Selo, where Nicholas doted on his daughters and son Alexei, whose fragile health cast a constant shadow. Yet even in these moments of domestic tranquility, the weight of governance pressed upon him. Reports of agrarian unrest, industrial strikes, and the growing influence of intellectuals who dreamed of constitutions and parliaments. Leadership under such pressure demanded vision and resolve, qualities that Nicholas, shaped by his father's conservative hand, found increasingly elusive as external forces mounted. The invisible warning signs emerged like faint cracks in winter ice, subtle at first, but widening with each passing year. The humiliating defeat in the Russo-Japanese War of 1905 exposed the empire's military vulnerabilities, leaving soldiers demoralized and the public questioning the Tsar's divine wisdom. Bloody Sunday, when imperial troops fired on peaceful petitioners before the Winter Palace, stained the snow with the blood of hundreds, and ignited the flames of the 1905 revolution. Nicholas responded with the October Manifesto, granting limited concessions like a Duma parliament, but these half measures satisfied no one. Whispers of discontent spread through underground pamphlets and secret meetings in dimly lit basements, where radicals plotted in hushed tones. Economic woes compounded the strain. Rapid industrialization brought wealth to some, but grinding poverty to the masses, with inflation eroding wages and food shortages becoming commonplace. Nicholas, isolated in his palaces and reliant on advisors who echoed his own hesitations, failed to read the shifting tides. The collapse did not begin with chaos. It began quietly, in the overlooked grievances and the rigid adherence to autocracy that blinded leaders to the gathering momentum of history. As Europe plunged into the abyss of the First World War in 1914, the pressures on Nicholas intensified to unbearable levels. Patriotic fervor swept the nation initially, with crowds cheering in the streets and soldiers marching to the front under banners of holy war. Yet the conflict's brutal reality soon revealed itself. Supply lines collapsed, artillery shells ran short, and millions perished in the muddy trenches of the Eastern Front, their bodies frozen in grotesque poses amid the relentless artillery thunder and the stench of decay. Nicholas, convinced of his sacred duty, made the fateful decision to assume personal command of the army in 1915, leaving the governance of the empire to his wife Alexandra and the enigmatic mystic Grigory Rasputin. This move, born of desperation and a desire to embody strong leadership, proved disastrous. Military blunders multiplied, morale plummeted, and rumors of treason within the royal court, fueled by Alexandra's German heritage, poisoned the public mind. Factories idled for lack of materials, trains stalled on snowbound tracks, and the home front descended into quiet desperation. By the time the signs became clear, it was already too late for measured reforms. The system groaned under the weight of mismanagement and unrelenting external assault. Rising tension gripped every layer of Russian society, as winter 1916 turned to the bitter cold of 1917. In the trenches, soldiers huddled around meager fires, sharing crusts of bread and stories of home, their faith in the Tsar eroding with each futile offensive. Back in the cities, women queued for hours in sub-zero temperatures for rations that often never arrived, their faces gaunt and voices rising in angry murmurs. Strikes erupted spontaneously in Petrograd's factories, the rhythmic clatter of machines falling silent as workers demanded bread and peace. Nicholas, far from the capital at military headquarters, received telegrams that painted an incomplete picture, his responses marked by hesitation and reliance on outdated protocols. Key decisions loomed, whether to suppress protests with force, grant broader political freedoms, or seek a separate peace with Germany. Each choice carried the risk of accelerating the empire's fracture. Rasputin's influence, exaggerated by scandal and rumor, further undermined the monarchy's legitimacy, as aristocrats plotted in shadowed drawing rooms and liberals in the Duma voiced open criticism. The air grew thick with anticipation, a palpable sense that the delicate balance sustaining the Romanov world was about to snap under the extreme pressure of leadership failures and popular fury. The moment the system began to fail arrived with shocking swiftness. In late February 1917, Petrograd's streets, usually muffled by snow, erupted in chaos as bread riots transformed into political demonstrations. Cossack troops, once reliable enforcers, refused to fire on the crowds, their horses stamping nervously amid the roar of voices chanting for an end to the war and the autocracy. Factories emptied, trams halted, and the once orderly capital descended into a swirling mass of humanity. Workers, soldiers, and students united in defiance. Nicholas, isolated and misinformed, issued orders for suppression that arrived too late or were ignored outright. Telegrams flew back and forth across the empire, but the command structure crumbled as generals hesitated and politicians maneuvered for advantage. On March 2, facing abdication demands from his own military commanders and political elites, Nicholas signed away 3 centuries of Romanov rule in a dimly lit train car, his face pale and hands steady only through sheer will. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the wind howling across the Russian plains. What had seemed an unassailable throne dissolved not in grand battle, but in the quiet surrender of a man overwhelmed by pressures he could no longer control. The human consequences of this leadership collapse unfolded with harrowing speed and brutality. As news of the abdication spread, celebrations in the streets gave way to confusion and fear. Provisional governments struggled to maintain order, while the Petrograd Soviet asserted parallel authority, creating dual power that paralyzed decision-making. Soldiers deserted en masse, streaming homeward through war-torn landscapes, their boots caked in mud and minds haunted by the ghosts of fallen comrades. Peasants seized land from estates, torching manor houses in fits of long-suppressed rage, the crackle of flames mingling with cries of triumph and despair. Famine deepened, Disease spread through overcrowded cities, and families fractured as loved ones vanished into the turmoil. The royal family, confined first to Tsarskoye Selo and later to Tobolsk and Ekaterinburg, endured humiliating captivity, their once lavish world reduced to sparse rooms and dwindling hopes. Nicholas's devotion to his family offered little solace against the encroaching darkness. Social breakdown accelerated as old norms evaporated, replaced by revolutionary fervor and opportunistic violence. The extreme pressures that tested imperial leadership had unleashed forces that no one could fully contain, leaving ordinary Russians to navigate a world stripped of certainty. In the long months that followed, the Provisional Order gave way to the Bolshevik seizure of power in October 1917, led by Lenin and his disciplined revolutionaries. The Winter Palace fell with surprisingly little resistance, its opulent halls echoing with the footsteps of armed sailors and soldiers. Civil war engulfed the former empire, pitting Reds against Whites in a brutal conflict that claimed millions more lives through battle, execution, and starvation. The once vast Russian Empire fragmented, its borders redrawn in blood, as new republics emerged and old loyalties died. Leadership under extreme pressure had not only failed to preserve the old order, but had accelerated its total transformation. The Romanov legacy, once synonymous with grandeur and divine mandate, became a cautionary tale whispered in the shadows of history. Factories were nationalized, churches looted, and the rhythms of daily life forever altered by ideology and iron-fisted control. Yet even in this rupture, echoes of the past persisted. The resilience of the Russian people, their capacity for endurance, forged in the crucible of collapse. The historical impact of Nicholas's tenure under pressure reverberated far beyond Russia's borders, reshaping the global order in profound and lasting ways. The Bolshevik victory inspired communist movements worldwide, from China to Cuba, challenging capitalist systems and igniting ideological conflicts that defined the 20th century. The empire's fall contributed to the redrawing of maps after World War I, creating power vacuums that fueled future tensions. Economically and socially, Russia embarked on a radical experiment that transformed a backward agrarian society into an industrial superpower, albeit at immense human cost. The abdication and subsequent events underscored the perils of rigid leadership in times of crisis, where hesitation, isolation, and miscalculation can unravel centuries of tradition. Historians continue to debate Nicholas's personal culpability, his piety, family focus, and limited political acumen against the overwhelming structural forces arrayed against him. Yet the lesson remains etched in the annals of collapse. When leaders fail to adapt under extreme pressure, the consequences cascade through generations, altering the trajectory of civilizations. As the last light faded on the Romanov era with the echoes of rifle fire in a Siberian basement marking the end of a dynasty, one is left to contemplate the haunting fragility of power. The snow still falls on Petrograd's streets, now renamed Leningrad, blanketing the remnants of imperial glory and quiet indifference. What began as a test of leadership under the crushing weight of war, famine, and discontent became an irreversible rupture, reminding us that empires do not fall in a single cataclysm, but erode through accumulated missteps and unheeded warnings. The human spirit, resilient yet scarred, endures in the survivors' tales and the ruins of what once was. In the end, the collapse of Tsarist Russia stands as a solemn testament to the delicate balance required of those who would guide nations through history's fiercest storms. A balance too often lost when pressure overwhelms preparation and vision yields to the comfort of the familiar. The silence that followed was not peace, but the prelude to new upheavals, their shadows stretching long across the century that followed.